Dr. Jessica McKenzie was having a perfectly normal Tuesday at NASA's First Contact Division until the coffee machine started speaking in Sanskrit. At first, she thought it was another practical joke from the engineering department, but when every electronic device in the building started broadcasting the same message, she realized this was the moment her team had been preparing for. People of Earth, the message repeated in every known human language. We are the Zektheri Confederation, and we challenge your world to ritual combat. Jessica couldn't help the grin that spread across her face. 10 years of running first contact scenarios, and reality had finally caught up with their preparations. She watched the massive ship emerge from the slipped space portal, its crystalline structure catching the sunlight in ways that defied physics. Dr. McKenzie, her assistant, Tommy Parker, burst into the office, nearly tripping over his own feet. Are you seeing this? The social media networks are exploding. She was already pulling up the feeds. Hashtag Space Showdown was trending worldwide, along with hashtag Bring It On and hashtag Humanity's Aliens. But what really caught her attention were the responses. Thousands of volunteers were already signing up through hastily created government websites. The Zektheri's second message came 3 hours later, after world leaders had gathered for an emergency UN session. Their supreme commander, a tall, ethereal being named Zixtal, appeared on every screen worldwide. Your enthusiasm is unexpected, the commander said, his translucent features showing what Jessica recognized as confusion. Most species require several of your Earth days to process the challenge. President Sarah Mitchell stood at the UN podium, her expression carefully neutral. Commander Zixtal, on behalf of Earth, we accept your challenge. However, we request a full briefing on the rules of engagement. The alien commander's expression shifted to something akin to amusement. You accept without knowing the stakes. We've been preparing for this kind of scenario for generations, Mitchell replied, a slight smile playing at her lips. Though usually the challenges come from beings called Klingons or Covenant. Jessica watched the confusion ripple through the alien delegation as their cultural analysis teams frantically searched for references to these unknown species. She could almost see the moment they discovered Earth's entertainment industry. These are fictional scenarios, one of the alien advisors asked, their voice carrying a note of disbelief. You prepare for cosmic challenges through entertainment. Star Trek, Halo, Mass Effect, Ender's Game, Tommy listed off, now munching on popcorn as they watched the exchange. We've been wargaming this stuff since before we had proper spaceflight. The Zektheri delegation requested a brief recess, during which Jessica's team observed their ship's energy signatures spiking in patterns that suggested intense communication with their homeworld. When they returned, Commander Zixtal looked significantly less confident. We have reviewed your species' historical response to challenges, the commander announced. Your victory against the Axis powers, your Cold War innovation race, your rapid technological advancement in the face of climate crisis. He paused, as if the words were difficult to form. We may have underestimated Earth's readiness. Oh, you definitely did, Jessica muttered under her breath, already reviewing the files of top candidates from the volunteer database. Mixed martial artists, chess grandmasters, quantum physicists, and special forces veterans. Humanity was putting forward a team that defied traditional combat categories. As the day drew to a close, Jessica stood at her office window, watching the alien ship shimmer against the darkening sky. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages from colleagues around the world, all sharing the same sentiment. Finally, all those movie nights and science fiction conventions were going to pay off. Send a message to all department heads, she told Tommy. Tell them to dust off Protocol X-Ray Delta. And Tommy, get me everything we have on ritual combat across human history. Something tells me the Zektheri are about to learn why you don't challenge a species that turns everything, even their fears, into entertainment. Major Tom Bradley had spent 15 years finding loopholes in military contracts, but this was different. The holographic rulebook floating above the Pentagon's conference table was written in 16 different alien languages, each with their own cultural context and mathematical foundations. "So you're telling me," he said, adjusting his reading glasses, "that the definition of combat-ready state varies based on the gravitational constant of the participating species' home world." The Zektheri legal representative, a being called Valixis who looked like a crystalline praying mantis, shifted uncomfortably. "That is correct." Engineer Kate Rodriguez was already scribbling calculations on her tablet. "Major, if we apply Earth's gravity as our baseline, we could theoretically modify the standard equipment tow." "One thing at a time, Kate," Bradley interrupted, but he was smiling. 3 days into the rules review, and they'd already found enough loopholes to drive a starship through. The room was filled with an unlikely mix of experts: military strategists, particle physicists, professional gamers, and even a professor of ancient combat sports. Each had been chosen for their ability to think outside conventional boundaries. Article 47, Subsection Delta, Bradley continued, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone finding the golden ticket. "Combat accessories may be modified as long as they maintain their primary function." Who defines primary function? Valix's crystalline structure flickered in what the human team had learned was anxiety. The participating species may define it according to their cultural understanding. A low chuckle spread through the human side of the room. Dr. Marcus Wong, the quantum physicist, was already pulling up design specs on his holographic display. "Our cultural understanding includes Batman, Iron Man, and Master Chief. This is going to be fun." The alien observers watched in growing concern as the humans systematically dissected every rule, finding interpretations that no species had considered in 10,000 years of ritual combat. They were particularly disturbed by the humans' concept of technical compliance. "You mean to say," Valixis asked, "that something can follow the rules exactly yet violate their intent?" "Welcome to Earth jurisprudence," Bradley replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "Wait until you hear about baseball's infield fly rule." Kate Rodriguez had transformed one corner of the room into an impromptu workshop. Holographic projections of equipment modifications floated around her like a tech-heavy art installation. Each design pushed the boundaries of the rules while maintaining perfect, frustrating compliance. "The energy shield must remain spherical," she mused, rotating a 3D model. "But nothing says we can't create directional variations in its density, or that we can't use the shield itself as a propulsion system." The breakthrough came on day 5, when Professor James Miller, expert in ancient combat sports, connected historical wrestling rules with a clause in the alien regulatory framework. "Look at this," he said, pulling up images of Greek pancration alongside the alien combat guidelines. "Both systems share a fundamental assumption about fair combat that actually creates a massive tactical advantage for anyone willing to fight unconventionally." By the end of the week, the Zektheri representatives had requested 3 emergency consultations with their high command. The humans' approach to the rules, this relentless search for edges and angles, this joy in finding ways to surprise, was unlike anything in their experience. "Final question," Bradley said on the last day, his expression innocently neutral. "The rules state that each competitor may bring one cultural item into the arena. Would you please define cultural item for the record?" As Valixis struggled to provide a definition that wouldn't somehow backfire, Dr. Mackenzie watched from the observation room, her grin growing wider. The Zektheri had expected to intimidate Earth with their challenge. Instead, they'd given humanity a puzzle box, and if there was one thing humans loved more than a fight, it was a puzzle that could help them win one. Area 51 had never been this crowded. Colonel Mike, Mad Dog, Harrison stood at the edge of the newly constructed training arena, watching his unlikely team put the modified combat gear through its paces. The Zektheri observers on the observation deck were visibly distressed, their crystalline forms flickering with anxiety. "You allow them to damage each other during practice?" the senior observer, Kintax, asked as Marcus, the Mountain Johnson, slammed his sparring partner onto the mat with enough force to trigger the facility's seismic sensors. "How else would they learn?" Harrison replied, making notes on his tablet. "The best training replicates combat conditions. Sometimes that means getting hurt." Dr. Amanda Wells, the quantum physicist, was running complex simulations while wearing a modified version of the alien combat suit. Her movements were precise, almost dance-like, as she tested the limits of the suit's gravitational response systems. "The interesting thing about alien tech," she called out between sequences, "is that it's too perfect." They'd never considered that imperfection could be an advantage. In the adjacent training bay, James "Ghost" Cooper was teaching a group of engineers how to exploit the microscopic lag in the energy shield's response time. His methods involved a strange combination of breakdancing, parkour, and mathematical timing. 0.37 seconds, he demonstrated, his movement creating a visible ripple in the shield. "That's all we need." In combat, a third of a second might as well be an eternity. The training regiment was unlike anything the aliens had seen. While other species focused on perfecting traditional forms, the humans seemed to be inventing new fighting styles on the fly. They called it adaptive combat evolution, but to the observers, it looked like organized chaos. "Watch this," Harrison said, pointing to where Kate Rodriguez was stress-testing her latest modification. The engineer had somehow transformed the standard-issue energy gauntlet into something that could best be described as a cross between a Swiss Army knife and a Tesla coil. "Is that allowed?" Kintax asked, his crystal structure vibrating with concern. "According to Article 47, subsection Delta," Harrison grinned. "Absolutely. We checked 3 times. The most disturbing element for the alien observers was the human concept of failure training. Each team member was required to lose repeatedly, in every possible way, against every type of attack. The humans called it learning from mistakes. But to the Zektheri, deliberately experiencing failure was nearly incomprehensible. During the lunch break, the training team gathered in the cafeteria, their conversations a mix of combat strategy and pop culture references. Dr. Wells was explaining how she used principles from Super Mario games to exploit the combat arena's artificial gravity. "The thing about video games," she said, drawing diagrams on a napkin, "is that they taught us to look for hidden mechanics in any system. Every game has Easter eggs. Why should alien combat tech be any different?" The breakthrough came during Week 3, when Johnson discovered that playing heavy metal music through his suit's communication system created resonance patterns that disrupted the enemy's targeting systems. The fact that it also terrified the alien observers was considered a bonus. "It's not just about winning the fights," Harrison explained to his team during the final briefing. "It's about showing them something they've never seen before. Every species in the galaxy thinks they know what combat looks like. We're going to show them what it looks like when humans get creative." As the training period drew to a close, the Zektheri observers filed their final report to the Confederation. The document was brief, but clear. "The humans have taken our most sacred combat traditions and turned them into what they call a boss fight. We are no longer certain who is testing whom." Harrison read the report with satisfaction. In just 1 month, his team had developed fighting styles that combined Earth's entire combat history with scientific innovation and pop culture creativity. The aliens had expected warriors. Instead, they got something uniquely human, a team that treated galactic combat like the world's most important game. and they were playing to win. The arena hummed with energy as Marcus, the Mountain Johnson, studied his opponent through the preparation chamber's observation window. The Zektheri champion, Vextor, was running through a series of perfect combat forms, his plasma-enhanced battle suit gleaming under the arena's artificial sun. "Remember," Kate Rodriguez said, making final adjustments to Johnson's modified equipment, "the coolant system we added isn't just for temperature control. It's a delivery system for the special sauce." Johnson finished, grinning, as he flexed his arms in what appeared to be modified hockey gear. "Still can't believe you combined antifreeze with energy drink." Dr. Wells checked the final readings on her tablet. The mixture's perfectly legal according to their guidelines. They never specified what constitutes a performance enhancement fluid because no species had ever considered combining chemicals for multiple effects. The arena doors slid open, and Johnson stepped out to the roar of the crowd. Millions watched worldwide, while the gathered alien delegates murmured in confusion at his seemingly primitive equipment. "Is this some form of protest?" the Zektheri commander asked from the observation deck. "Your champion appears under-equipped." Colonel Harrison's reply was cut off by the starting signal. Vextor moved with liquid grace, his suit's energy fields creating beautiful patterns in the air. It was perfect, practiced, predictable. Johnson started dancing. Not fighting. Dancing. The break-dancing moves he practiced for weeks had the exact effect they'd predicted. Vextor's targeting systems, designed to track traditional combat forms, couldn't process the erratic movements. "Is your champion malfunctioning?" a concerned alien observer asked. "Nah," Harrison replied, trying not to laugh. "He's just getting down." The first real exchange came 3 minutes in. Vextor launched a perfect plasma strike, the kind that had won countless ritual combats. Johnson met it with a move that, looking suspiciously like a hockey check combined with a capoeira spin. The resulting collision created a spray of Johnson's special coolant mixture. Where it hit Vextor's energy field, the field crystallized momentarily. A side effect Kate had discovered by accident while drinking her morning energy drink in the lab. "What is this?" Vextor demanded, his perfect form faltering, as parts of his suit's energy field became temporarily solid and heavy. "Just a little something we cooked up," Johnson called back, now moving through what appeared to be a combination of martial arts and disco moves. "We call it crystal light. Get it?" The alien audience watched in horror as their champion's sophisticated technology was gradually transformed into a liability. Every time Vextor tried to use his energy field offensively, Johnson would counter with another spray of his coolant mix, creating more crystallized zones that threw off the suit's balance. "This is not how ritual combat is conducted," the Zektheri commander protested. Dr. Mackenzie, watching from the Earth delegation's box, smiled. "According to which rule, specifically?" The battle reached its climax when Johnson, now covered in a mix of sweat and his own coolant solution, executed what he later called the supersonic ice slide. Using the crystallized patches on the arena floor, he built up speed through a series of breakdancing power moves, creating a routine that was part combat, part performance art. Vextor, his perfect combat programming unable to adapt to the chaos, finally lost balance on the slick surface. Johnson's final move, a modified Brazilian jiu-jitsu hold combined with what looked suspiciously like a wrestling pin, ended the match. The arena fell silent, then erupted in a mix of human cheers and alien exclamations of disbelief. Johnson helped his opponent up, then did a victory dance that would later become a global meme. That, he said into the stunned silence that followed, was for every kid who ever got told their dance moves would never be useful in a fight. In the preparation chamber afterward, as Kate ran diagnostics on the slightly dented but triumphant gear, Dr. Wells was already calculating new possibilities. If they think this was unorthodox, wait until they see what we have planned for round 2. The Zektheri would later add 100 new regulations to their combat rulebook. Unfortunately for them, they were about to learn another human specialty, the art of working within updated guidelines, while still finding new ways to cause chaos. Dr. Amanda Wells had never expected her PhD in quantum physics to lead to an intergalactic arena. But here she was, running final calculations on her tablet, while her opponent, the renowned Zektheri warrior Sindar, performed the traditional pre-combat meditation. "Your probability matrices are ready," Kate Rodriguez said, handing her a modified neural interface. "I still can't believe you convinced them that a quantum computer counts as a cultural item, because it represents human scientific achievement." "The best part," Wells grinned, fitting the device behind her ear. "They still think it's just for calculations." The arena had been modified since Johnson's victory 3 days ago. The floor now featured anti-slip coating, and the environmental controls had been tightened to prevent any more temperature-based exploits. The aliens were learning, but so were the humans. "Remember," Colonel Harrison's voice came through her earpiece, "Sindar's species has a highly structured combat philosophy. They see battle as a form of mathematical poetry." "Perfect," Wells replied, running through her final equipment check. "Let's show them some human math." As she entered the arena, Wells began her own pre-combat routine, solving complex quantum equations out loud while her neural interface projected the calculations in holographic form around her. The alien audience watched in confusion as mathematical formulas danced through the air. "Is this some form of intimidation display?" Sindar asked, his crystal form shifting, in what the humans had learned was a sign of uncertainty. "Oh no," Wells replied cheerfully. "I'm just wondering about the quantum superposition of your next move. You see, according to my calculations, you have exactly 7 opening sequences available to you, but only 3 that align with your cultural combat protocols." Sindar hesitated. His first move halted mid-motion. It was one of the 3 she predicted. "Fascinating," Wells continued, dodging his attack while simultaneously solving a differential equation. "Your combat style is based on sacred geometries, isn't it? But have you considered the chaos theory implications of a nonlinear response?" She demonstrated her point by breaking into a series of seemingly random movements that nevertheless followed a complex mathematical pattern, one that her neural interface was calculating in real time based on her opponent's reactions. The alien audience watched in growing distress as Wells turned the battle into a living mathematics lesson, predicting and countering Sindar's moves while explaining the statistical probabilities of each exchange. "There's a 73.2% chance you'll attempt a high-energy strike next," she called out, "but that creates a fascinating quantum uncertainty in your shield harmonics. Would you like to discuss the Heisenberg implications?" Sindar's perfect form began to show cracks as Wells combined physical combat with an ongoing physics lecture. Each time he established a rhythm, she would break it with an observation about the mathematical flaws in his approach. "The problem with perfect symmetry in combat," she explained, using his own momentum to send him spinning, "is that it becomes predictable. Chaos, on the other hand," she launched into a series of moves based on fractal patterns, "is reliably unreliable." The turning point came when Wells started completing Sindar's sacred combat forms for him, adding her own variables to the equations. It was like watching someone play chess while simultaneously explaining why each of their opponent's future moves was mathematically inevitable. "Impossible," Sindar finally said, after Wells had predicted and countered his 7th consecutive attack sequence. "Our combat forms are based on universal mathematical constants." "Exactly," Wells beamed, dodging another strike. "But you're using classical mathematics in a quantum universe," Here, let me show you where the divergence occurs. The match ended not with a traditional victory, but with Sindar requesting a pause to discuss Wells' theories about the quantum nature of combat mathematics. The alien warrior had found something he considered more interesting than victory. In the observation deck, Dr. Mackenzie watched as Wells and her former opponent covered the arena floor with mathematical proofs, both now completely absorbed in a discussion about the theoretical physics of combat. Did she just win by teaching? Colonel Harrison asked, bewildered. No, Mackenzie smiled. She won by being human. We don't just think outside the box. We question whether the box was ever really there in the first place. Kate Rodriguez stood in the preparation chamber, making final adjustments to what the team had affectionately dubbed the Swiss Army suit. The standard-issue alien combat armor had been modified so extensively that it barely resembled its original form, yet somehow still complied with every single regulation. They added 17 new rules after Johnson's match and 23 after Wells. She muttered, calibrating a component that looked suspiciously like a repurposed coffee maker. But they never said anything about modular adaptability. Dr. Mackenzie watched from the observation window as Kate's opponent, the cybernetically enhanced Zekthari warrior Tixlin, performed equipment checks on his own pristine, unmodified suit. They're filing another protest about your modifications. Let them, Kate grinned, attaching what appeared to be a miniaturized version of her garage tool rack to her back. Major Bradley already confirmed everything's legal. They're just mad because they never thought of making their tech more flexible. The arena had been modified yet again, this time with energy dampeners to prevent excessive technical innovation. The aliens had learned from the previous matches, but they still didn't understand how human engineers thought. Remember, Harrison said through the comm, Tixlin's cybernetics make him predictable. He'll expect your tech to follow similar patterns. Kate laughed, the sound echoing through her modified helmet. Good thing I learned engineering from action movies instead of textbooks. As she stepped into the arena, the alien audience erupted in confused chatter. Her suit looked like what would happen if Tony Stark and Inspector Gadget collaborated on a project while watching too many Anon shows. This is highly irregular, Tixlin stated, his cybernetic eyes scanning her equipment. Our scans cannot identify the purpose of most of your modifications. That's the point, Kate called back cheerfully, deploying what looked like a cross between a solar panel and a pizza cutter. Human engineering philosophy number 1. If it looks stupid but works, it isn't stupid. The battle began with Tixlin launching a series of precise, programmed attacks. Each time he thought he had Kate cornered, she would deploy another seemingly random modification. A shield became a skateboard. A communications array transformed into a makeshift disco ball. And at one point, she used her suit's cooling system to make hot coffee. It's she, making beverages during combat, the Zekthari commander asked in disbelief. Multitasking, Dr. Mackenzie explained. It's a human specialty. The turning point came when Tixlin attempted to use his most advanced combat protocol. Kate's response was to deploy every modification simultaneously, creating what she later described as organized chaos theory in action. Your technology has no clear purpose. Tixlin protested, his cybernetic systems struggling to process the seemingly random array of gadgets and gizmos. Wrong, Kate shot back, using her coffee maker-turned-steam generator to create a tactical fog bank. It has whatever purpose I need it to have. Adaptability over specialization. The arena became a testing ground for every wild engineering idea Kate had ever dreamed up. Each time Tixlin adapted to one of her modifications, she'd combine 2 more in ways that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. This defies all known engineering principles, one of the alien technical observers complained. No, Harrison corrected. It defies your engineering principles. This is how humans build things. We start with what if and work backward to why not. The final move came when Kate combined every system in her suit into what she called the ultimate Swiss Army solution. The resulting display of technical improvisation was so complex that 3 alien engineers requested immediate retirement. How? Texlin asked from his position on the arena floor, his perfect cybernetic systems thoroughly overwhelmed. How did you conceive of such chaos? Kate helped him up, her suit still wearing with dozens of improbable modifications. I grew up taking apart toasters and watching science fiction. Sometimes, the best engineering solutions come from asking, wouldn't it be cool if? In the observation deck, the Alien Technical Committee was frantically rewriting their engineering manuals. They had finally realized that human technology wasn't primitive. It was simply unbound by the very constraints they had always taken for granted. James "Ghost" Cooper sat cross-legged in the center of the preparation chamber, his modified combat suit powered down, a holographic chessboard floating before him. The Zektheri's final champion, Grand Warrior Zarkax, watched through the barrier with growing confusion. Your opponent has brought his most advanced combat loadout, Colonel Harrison mourned through the comm. Are you sure about this strategy? Trust me, Cooper replied, moving a knight across the holographic board. I didn't spend 6 years in special forces just to learn how to fight. I learned how to end conflicts before they begin. The arena had been modified one final time, now bristling with countermeasures against every trick humans had displayed so far. The aliens had prepared for everything, except what Cooper had in mind. As he stepped into the arena, he carried only one additional item, besides his basic suit, a small holographic projector. The alien audience murmured in confusion, expecting another display of human combat innovation. Before we begin, Cooper announced, his voice carrying across the arena, I'd like to propose a different kind of challenge. Zarkax, his battle suit humming with enough power to level a small building, paused. Explain. Cooper activated the projector, creating a complex 3-dimensional display between them. This is a representation of every move from every match so far. I've added probability matrices, strategic analyses, and something we humans call game theory. Dr. Mackenzie leaned forward in the observation deck, suddenly understanding. He's not going to fight at all. Your combat records show that you've won 372 ritual matches. Cooper continued, the display shifting to show Zarkax's history. But have you ever won without fighting? The arena fell silent as Cooper began breaking down the entire tournament, move by move, decision by decision. He showed how Johnson's chaos had led to Wells' mathematical disruption, which had enabled Kate's technical innovation. Each match wasn't just a battle, he explained, the holographic display now showing complex strategic patterns. It was part of a larger game, one that's been playing out since the moment your ships entered our solar system. Zarkax's battle suit powered down slightly as he stepped closer to examine the display. You're suggesting this entire tournament was a single strategic exercise? Cooper smiled. Welcome to Human Military Doctrine 101. Why win a battle when you can win the war? The display shifted again, now showing the subtle ways each human victory had forced the Zektheri to modify their approach, their rules, even their basic understanding of combat. With each change, they had moved further from their traditional methods and closer to human-style adaptability. Your final victory condition, Cooper said, highlighting a section of the display, requires you to defeat us using superior combat techniques. But look what's happened. You're already using our techniques. You've been adapting, improvising, breaking your own molds. The alien command center erupted in chaos as the implications became clear. By trying to counter human unpredictability, the Zektheri had themselves become unpredictable. Their perfect, structured combat system had been transformed. So, Cooper concluded, powering down his combat suit completely. You can either fight me and prove you've learned to think like humans, thus fulfilling our victory condition, or forfeit and admit we've already changed your entire approach to combat. Either way, Earth wins. Zarkak stood motionless for a long moment, his battle suit's energy fields flickering as he processed the strategy. Finally, he did something no Zektheri warrior had done in 10,000 years of ritual combat. He laughed. "In all my years of combat," the alien champion said, also powering down his suit, "no one has ever defeated me with a logic puzzle. Your species is remarkable." From the observation deck, Dr. Mackenzie watched as the two warriors began discussing strategy rather than trading blows. Did he just win the entire tournament with a PowerPoint presentation? No, Colonel Harrison replied, unable to hide his grin. He won it by being the most dangerous kind of human, one who knows that the biggest victories don't always involve fighting. The UN Assembly Hall was packed with both human and alien delegates 1 week after the final match. The massive Zektheri ship now floated peacefully above New York, its crystalline structure catching the sunset in ways that made it look almost festive. To summarize, Commander Zixtel said, his crystal form now displaying colors that Dr. Mackenzie had learned indicated amusement. "You turned our sacred combat tournament into a multi-layered teaching exercise." "Not exactly," Dr. Mackenzie replied from the podium. "We just did what humans always do. We adapted, improvised, and turned a challenge into an opportunity." The screens behind her displayed highlights from each match. Johnson's dance combat, Wells' mathematical warfare, Kate's engineering chaos, and Cooper's strategic revelation. Each victory had added to a larger picture that none of the alien species had anticipated. "In just 1 month," Zixtal continued, "you have forced us to rewrite our combat manuals, rethink our engineering principles, and question traditional methods that have stood for 10,000 years. And that," President Mitchell said, rising to join Mackenzie at the podium, "is exactly why we're proposing the Intergalactic Innovation Exchange Program." The alien delegates stirred as the proposal was displayed. It was unprecedented. A program where species would share not just technology or resources, but methods of thinking, of problem-solving, of seeing the universe in new ways. "Your species is young," one of the alien counselors observed. "Your unified civilization has existed for less than a century, yet you approach problems like no other species we've encountered." "That's because we never stopped learning," Mackenzie explained. "Every challenge we've faced, from our first steps out of caves to our first steps on the moon, has taught us something new. We don't just adapt to survive, we adapt to thrive." In the audience, the human team sat together, each now wearing the newly created Earth Defense Force uniform. Johnson was teaching some young Zektheri warriors about breakdancing, while Dr. Wells and several alien scientists were deep in discussion about quantum combat mathematics. "Your entertainment," another counselor said, still sounding bewildered. "Your science fiction. You use it to prepare for events that haven't even happened yet. Imagine." Kate Rodriguez called out from her seat, where she was showing a group of alien engineers how to modify their equipment. "How much more we could all create if we combined your technology with our creativity." The assembly hall buzzed with excitement as more species began to see the possibilities. The Zektheri's challenge had been intended to put Earth in its place. Instead, it had opened the galaxy's eyes to a new way of thinking. "There will be those who resist such change," Zixtal warned, though his tone was more intrigued than concerned. "Of course," Cooper replied, standing to address the hall. "Change is scary. But as we say on Earth, the only thing scarier than change is standing still while the universe moves forward." The vote was almost unanimous. Within hours, Earth had gone from being seen as a primitive challenger to becoming the center of a new galactic initiative. Species that had been static for millennia were suddenly eager to learn how humans approached problems. "You know what this means," Harrison said to Mackenzie, as they watched ships from a dozen different species enter Earth's orbit. "We're going to have to build one hell of a training program." Mackenzie smiled, watching as Johnson began teaching an impromptu dance class to a mixed group of humans and aliens. Wells was already planning combined physics combat seminars, while Kate had started a workshop on creative engineering for multiple species. "We'll do what we always do," she replied. "We'll make it up as we go along, learn from our mistakes, and somehow turn it into something amazing." As the sun set on this new era, the Zektheri ship's crystal structure began glowing in patterns that suspiciously resembled Earth's city lights, their first attempt at human-style creative expression. Somewhere in the galaxy, other species were already beginning to ask themselves a very human question. What if we tried something new?